I can even still to this day feel in my body all of the awkwardness, all of the insecurity that I think I held for the first, 25 years of my life. Running from it is impossible. It is impossible. So about time you consider a new approach.
Welcome to AI to Z. Hosted by Airswift's Chief Revenue Officer, Anna Frazzetto, we delve into artificial intelligence, health tech, and more. Tune in and journey with us into the future.
Welcome, everyone. Today, Henna Pryor joins us, and let me start by just reading this little excerpt from your LinkedIn, which I absolutely love. Event planners call me a little spicy, a little sweet, and increasingly sought out for my fresh tools and takes on leadership, sales, and workplace performance. And I don't argue. The simplest way to describe what I do is I'm your secret weapon for impossible change. My clients hire me to inspire, teach, and coach their teams through the latest science-based approaches to activating stronger performance in the work that they do. So Henna, it's a thrill to have you here today. I met Henna a few years ago at a conference, and I was so impressed by your presentation style, your energy that you bring to the conversation. And then you were also a guest speaker at the Lady Leaders Book Club, which, by the way, your book sits on my desk all the time. It's a constant reminder. And I think the one thing that we share in common is coming both from immigrant parents and a lot of times feeling like a foreigner in your own country, right? So the whole good awkward really hits home with me. So why don't we start, Henna? Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. And Anna, I've always been a super fan of yours. I don't think I've walked into a single circle where your name isn't put out there with just fondness and reverence, and everyone admires you for what you do. So I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic. So why don't we start with the book? What inspired you to write Good Awkward? Maybe you can share a personal experience that kind of led you to the awkwardness in a positive light.
Sure. Yeah. Let's start with the inverse. I never thought of that word as having one positive connotation to it for the majority of my life. I think despite what people see, I think people right now, they see the version that they get today, which is the keynote speaker who has done a lot of rehearsal, a lot of preparation, a lot of research, who comes across well-spoken. And I laugh at this sort of external perception because I can even still to this day feel in my body all of the awkwardness, all of the insecurity that I think I held for the first, 25 years of my life that really had a grip on me. So you mentioned quickly being, first born to immigrant parents. My parents are from India and Pakistan, respectively. I was first in the U.S., born here. And so anybody with that story kind of understands this, trying to figure out how you fit into the fold. They have different customs, traditions than what they came to this country observing kids of similar age doing. So my food didn't smell the same in my lunchbox. My clothes were always slightly different. They weren't like the stylish things my friends were wearing. I couldn't wear my hair, at the time everybody was spraying their bangs really high. I wasn't allowed to do that. And so every part of me felt like the version of me that was on display was clashing with the version that I really wanted to be. And without overly simplifying it, I'm Henna. At the time, it was the 80s. Hanna-Barbera was it. And I just wanted to be Anna or Jennifer or Michelle. Like, just give me one of these simple names. But nope, everything was a little bit askew in my world. And it felt like all through high school and until I got to college, it needed to be something that I solved for. How do I stop feeling awkward? I feel awkward all the time. I just don't want people to know I'm feeling this way. And it wasn't until I got to college and then ultimately into the professional world that I kind of had this realization, actually, Henna, running from it is impossible. It is impossible. So about time you consider a new approach. And that's when getting good at it became the new angle and something that I leaned into really fully starting around then.
Right. So Henna, what's interesting about that, like I said, is so relatable to, my own, journey. And it's a little bit about embracing and enjoying the differences, right? We try so hard that you want to be accepted, and you think acceptance is being like the rest, as
Yeah.
opposed to acceptance is embracing what's different and unique about you and having others accept that and not you change to fit into them. So maybe you could
Yeah.
talk a little bit about, personal journey
Yeah.
and kind of what influenced your life and your career.
Sure. Yeah. And I think just to maybe start with what you just said, I think for many of us that grew up, again, with immigrant parents or even without, it is a story of assimilation, right? We want to be as similar to the people around us because social acceptance is still a very real and very hardwired human need. That is how, I remember reading a book when the kids were babies about how one of the most ineffective things you can say to children is around the race conversation is we don't see color. Because children very early on learn to categorize, oh, you're wearing the blue penny and I'm wearing the red penny. That means you're on the red team and I'm the blue team, right? Unless they have true color blindness of some sort, we do see color. So to say, hey, this isn't different is actually creating dissonance. And so similarly, in our personal lives and professional lives, it kind of feels this like, I don't want to be different, but I am. So I can either keep fighting that thing or rolling with it. So on a personal level, I think all through high school, I tried to dress like my friends. Every single photo of me, I am ghost white because I was trying to wear the same makeup that my friends were wearing, right? It's a mess. The whole thing is a mess. I was wearing clothes that weren't quite right for my body type because, again, I was trying to assimilate. And then I got to college, and I think in college, you do just have a larger cross section. I went to a pretty large college, so you have a different cross section of people with different interests, and you're a little more easily able to find kind of people who are into everything. And so I started to find my footing, started to embrace sort of every part of myself that I used to stuff down. But then the interesting thing happened when I entered the professional world. I thought at this point, Anna, I had solved for awkwardness. I don't have to worry about feeling this way anymore. College was good for me. I found some kind of confidence, right? It's gone. It's good. I feel better now. And then I got to professional spaces, and I realized that every inflection point, so first job, first big project in front of a new client, first opportunity for promotion, every inflection point, all those little Henna feelings came rushing back. I don't belong here. I'm different than they are. I don't do things the way they do. I feel so awkward. I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to do the wrong thing. Every one of those feelings came back. And then I remember this was my turning point. I remember hearing a podcast from our queen, Brene Brown, who a lot of people love. And she started to hold this tagline. She would say, stay awkward, brave, and kind. And I remember hearing that and thinking, stay brave. Yes, my parents taught me about courage. Stay kind. Yes, I know being kind is important. But listen, I got to disagree with you, Mama. Stay awkward? Like, I've worked for 30 years to try to get rid of this feeling. Why do I have to stay awkward? Are you out of your mind? And it just made me very curious. I thought I can't be the only person who struggles with this emotion at work, who struggles with feeling like, should I raise my hand? Should I speak up? Should I take this micro risk in front of other people for fear of getting it wrong? And it started the deep dive into how can we use this emotion and wield it as a force for good instead of this thing that holds us and grips us from moving forward.
Oh, and the feeling of, what if what I say is going to upset a particular person in a meeting, and you don't want to ruffle any feathers? And that constant analysis paralysis that you go through in your head that causes you to literally shut down and not be the person that you want to be. Do you have specific moments that you can share that you can actually think of, sitting there and going, haha, okay,
Yeah.
I gotta stop this.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, so many. I think it started with every meeting that I sat in where I would have a contribution that I would want to make. And I could almost feel my hands starting to rise. And then there would be a slapping it back down because what if you say the wrong thing? What if you don't actually know what you're talking about, right? So that would happen a lot. And then inevitably, as happens, sometimes I would find the courage to say the thing. So I raise my hand, I pose a suggestion, and it's met with some sort of, oh, well, that just won't work. Yeah, no, and we already tried that, and a bad idea, right? Not only do I feel awkward in that moment, sure, I feel flushed with embarrassment. Wow, Henna, it's dummy. Why did you say that thing? But I would also notice that experience would contaminate the future, meaning if it didn't work out that one time, I was way less likely to try it again. So it started to create this habit of not only, having the embarrassment the first time, but then creating this cycle of inaction in the future. I don't want to feel that again, because awkwardness is an emotion of discomfort. The book is called Good Awkward, but let me be clear. This is a social emotion of discomfort. It doesn't feel good. And so I would feel that discomfort. I would take that as a signal in my brain as don't do that again in particular. And it would turn into avoidance. And so more than once, I think I had left opportunities on the table. I had left, contributions on the table. I remember I stayed in my first job, which was Big Four public accounting, for nearly 3 years. Even though I hated it, Anna, I really did not like that job. I just, I met great people, but it was not for me. But I stayed for years, even when amazing new jobs came to my doorstep, because the risk of letting my parents down and losing their approval was very high. Even though I hated that job, I was also good at it. So the risk of losing whatever little social capital I'd built was terrifying. And also just the fear of, what if this next thing I try, which ended up being staffing, what if this next thing I try, what if I'm no good? What if I'm no good? Then I'm going to feel awkward all over again. And so it took me 3 years to finally embrace the discomfort that all of this brought, enough to make a change. And I just wonder what might my life had been if I had been able to reimagine what that emotion was telling me earlier, and how might I have made decisions differently. But really, I mean, to this day, there's still micro moments like that. I haven't solved for it, but it's the things that grip you from doing the thing that you see right over the other side that you really want to do. Those are the ones that I think I experienced frequently and were most dangerous.
Right. So, Henna, let's talk maybe like some key strategies, right, from your books that people can kind of leverage so that their awkwardness can turn into personal and professional growth. What can we do?
Yeah, there's lots of things that we can do. So the first thing is, it begins before it begins, meaning before you start doing anything, I want you to do a little bit of just a deep dive analysis of your own way you were raised, the messages that you got, the media. For me, awkwardness was an incredibly gripping emotion, mostly because I was raised in a culture. So this isn't just my parents. My parents are wonderful, but a culture where there's a very strong emphasis on what other people think. So there's actually an expression, if you've got any South Asian listeners, they'll know it. They'll say, log kya kenge, which translates to, what will other people think? So a lot of times I would want to do something or have an idea, but it was, what will other people think? What will the community think? And so I learned over years and years and years to filter my decision-making, not through, will this bring me joy? Or will I love this? But what will other people think of this decision? What will they think if you go into that industry that's 100% commissions? What will they think if you marry this white boy? What will they think? I did all of those things, to be clear, because rebel, but what will they think? And so I had to first just unpack, where is all of this coming from? And it's because I had this deep-rooted story of my success in this world is based on what will other people think. I was looking for my validity or my contributions in the world through the lens of who other people saw. And so I had to first rewrite that narrative and redefine, what does success want to look like for me? And this took time, right? But do I really want to make my life decisions on what other people think? Or do I really want to try some things and feel some things out that feel right to me? So unpacking those stories is really, really critical. We can't leave them be. We have to think about where this emotion comes from. And also kind of doing a little audit of your history. I mentioned quickly this idea of contamination. Are you someone where, let's say again, Anna, you and I are in a meeting, there's a new person in the room and I mispronounce their name horribly, right? When that experience happens, do I let it contaminate the future? Ooh, Henna, you're never going to try to say anybody's name in a meeting ever again, right? That was embarrassing. That was awful. Or do we look for the redemptive story? A redemptive story is simply looking for the gift in the garbage. I didn't get that right, and that was embarrassing, but it gave me an opportunity for them to correct me. I actually feel a bit more connected to this person now, who I may have not had much conversation with before. And I was able to demonstrate in the meeting that I'm someone who can circle back and course correct, right? It gave me an opportunity to demonstrate that part of my skill set. Do we look for the gifts in the garbage? Too often with awkwardness, we want that feeling to go away so badly that we stuff it down, we push it away, like make this go away as quickly as possible. And we don't actually take even a moment to look at the retroactive of where was the good in that situation? And we have to look for the good in that situation if we want a shot in heck at trying to do something similar in the future. If we don't, our muscles learn, they listen. They're like, nope, bad feeling, don't want to do that again. So we actually have to do some overriding. The one other thing, and we can talk about any of these in more detail, is awkwardness is a great partner to humor. Like, can we put a little bit of humor into this? Because a lot of times people think, I feel impossibly awkward. It's impossible that anybody else feels as awkward as I do right now. It's one of those emotions that we tend to feel so big and we don't think other people feel it as much as we do. So here's some good news. It is universal. Awkwardness lives inside of uncertainty. Nobody has solved for it. Not the most confident, polished, poised person you know. Nobody has solved for it. What they have figured out is not how to avoid it. They figured out how to improve their comeback rate. Meaning an awkward situation happens, they can quickly turn to humor. They can quickly name the awkwardness in order to pop the tension out of it. It's another way to kind of activate humor by naming it. They've figured out how to move through it quickly, but they haven't learned to avoid it. So little mental pre-work, a little bit of doing a retroactive of when these situations occurred, how do I handle it? But then perhaps most importantly, having a strategy, humor, naming it for when the situations do arise so that you can work on improving that comeback rate. And that takes practice.
It does. And I love the example that you give about not pronouncing a name correctly. That's something that I've experienced. And you're right. The initial reaction is, oh my goodness, I cannot believe I butchered that name. But in reality, I mean, often now I do use humor where if I mispronounce a name, I ask the person, tell me how to pronounce the name correctly. I try to pronounce it. And often I'll say, just keep in mind, I'm Italian. I turn everybody's name into an Italian name. So that's why it sound a little bit different. But using humor to kind of counterbalance the mistake that you made. I'm a big practicer of that and a big fan of that. It also creates a little levity in the room when sometimes things can be tense. And it's a great way to diffuse a situation, to try to, if you get a couple of people to start laughing, then it almost feels like those walls are crumbling down a little bit, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a way to activate psychological safety. I think that's a word that a phrase that we use a lot, psychological safety, which is, how do we make it okay for our people to speak up? Humor, when used correctly, and there's a whole chapter in the book that talks about sort of the use cases for it, but when used correctly is a powerful way to create that feeling of safety. So one of my favorite examples in the book is I remember I interviewed my friend Bob Russo. He's a former multi-decade executive at IBM, and he told me this story. I laughed out loud of being in a meeting and his boss was proposing something, and let's just say he made a comment that landed with an absolute thud. Like this boss said something and it was one of these, like everybody in the room's like, oh God, no, right? It was not it. And the boss in that moment, he followed his comment up with, well, that just went over like a fart in church. And he said, immediately, everyone laughed, everyone's shoulders kind of relaxed because everyone was sort of doing this like beady-eyed, oh God, is someone going to tell him that was not, not great? But he sort of recognized it quickly, named it quickly, used some humor. And not only was everyone able to let it go and move on, but what it created for the rest of that meeting was an environment where others who maybe didn't hold his position of power felt a little more empowered to not get it right? To maybe step in it, knowing that they weren't going to be put on blast, that we weren't going to take everything quite so seriously in the attempt of putting ideas out there, right? Not everything's okay, but when the person in power can model that, it creates this psychological safety that every leader, every company says they want, but sometimes struggle to activate. It's in those moments that you create it more fully through action instead of just talking about it.
Right. Excellent. So let's talk a little bit now, taking the conversation a bit broader. How do you think society's perception of awkwardness can change to appreciate its positive aspects as you lay out in the book? And what can businesses and organizations do to kind of encourage this good, awkward, type of moments amongst teams?
Yeah, there's two prongs to this that I think are really important. I think awkwardness in particular is a stepping stone to vulnerability and the aforementioned psychological safety. So, I think in the last decade, vulnerability has been the superstar term. Leaders should be more vulnerable. Teams should be more vulnerable. It's the stepping stone to trust. It's the stepping stone to communication. That said, vulnerability is not easy, and it's not easy for a lot of people. And I think a lot of times people hear it as part of their professional development to-do list, and they try to jump to it when they're not ready. Jumping to vulnerability creates faux vulnerability. It actually creates more walls and more problems. So what I'd rather people do is start to create and embrace those micro moments of just not getting it perfect. How do we just peek back behind the curtain or undo the veil of what is our day-to-day blunders, our foibles, our missteps, especially in the virtual world? This is hard. When we all worked together in the same spaces, we could watch so-and-so trip over their own 2 feet. We could watch the person mispronounce the name. We could see the typo on their slide deck. We would all just be there live in real time and all learn to adjust live in real time. Now, we're virtual a lot, we're hybrid. We're more asynchronous, meaning if I do notice your typo, I don't have to tell you right then and there in the moment. I can tell you hours later, right? We don't have these same experiences of getting to see other people embodying this emotion. And so increasingly, it feels like it's just us. It feels like it's just us. Nobody else feels this way. So for leaders, for organizations, one of the most powerful things you can do is I truly believe that social muscle is the same as building physical muscle, is the same as building mental muscle. And a lot of times when teams struggle with communication, collaboration, open, authentic conversation, difficult conversations, part of the struggle isn't just a lack of awareness, it's a lack of practice. Everyone feels more awkward when they don't get to do it, when they don't get these moments of having a social interaction that could go in a different direction or to share something that they're not sure how it's going to be received. So I love the idea of at the beginning of a meeting, have teams quickly, 5 minutes, share your cracked egg stories of the week. A cracked egg story is what's a blunder? What's a mistake? What's something that you tried and you're like, yeah, that didn't go the way it was supposed to go, right? Just creating space for the fact that everyone has these, but bringing them to the surface, bringing them to the limelight so people understand that they're not alone. How did we move through them? What did we learn? Similarly, you can do bad idea brainstorms. Oftentimes I hear leaders complain, I wish my teams would take more risks. I wish they would stretch themselves a little, be more innovative, try new things. And then I say, well, what are you doing to create that? And they say, well, we tell people they should make mistakes. They should make mistakes. And I'm like, telling people doesn't really mean anything because they're still afraid. They want social acceptance. So start a meeting 5 minutes and say, all right, for the next 5 minutes, we're going to have a brainstorm for these projects we're working on. Unrealistic ideas only. As wild as you can think of, something that sounds absolutely nuts to you. People go around sharing and leaders are like, Henna, why would we do that? Well, 2 reasons. First of all, if you're only focusing on realistic ideas, that's where all your competition is hanging out too, FYI. And second of all, you often find that in there, one completely nutso unrealistic idea may actually have some merit. There may be something that could be done. But most importantly, the final bit is that even if every idea is unrealistic, undoable, terrible, the ideas that follow in the rest of the meeting, the conversation that flows following, research says is more generative, more innovative, more open, and full of more trust because people have let their guard down. They're more open. Yeah.
Exactly. Letting your guard down because there's such a negative connotation, like you use the word vulnerability, right? And I mean, I can remember like some of my early managers, like being vulnerable would not that would make you a weak manager if you were
Yes.
vulnerable. If you showed your team that you were sensitive to something, that would make you not a strong leader in an organization, and that you needed to have that guard and you needed to act a certain way. So it's great. I love the shift. And I actually think because of the virtual component, it's pushing us in the direction to be more comfortable, to let the guard down, because this is the way we operate today.
Yeah. The virtual component, it's such a double-edged sword, right? In some ways, I've read the research around how it equalizes the playing field in some ways for women or marginalized groups, people of color. So in that way, there's benefit. It also allows for more flexibility for working families, caregivers, right? So there are benefits. The downside is that social atrophy is very real. People, I say this like tongue in cheek, people forget how to people. When they haven't seen folks in a while, they forget how to be. And I love some research. One of my mentors and friends is a woman named Leanne Davey, and she talks about how you build trust. And interestingly, she shows this pyramid where when you're with people in person, connection comes first, and then kind of reliability and trust comes second, meaning you connect with them first, and then you sort of default to, I trust you unless you give me a reason not to, because you've connected first. In the virtual environment, though, they tend to be flipped. We're almost vetting, can I trust this person? Can I rely on this person? And then slowly over time, connection builds. But we don't get that benefit of that like fast track moments of connection the way we do in person, which is why I think there's so much more value now on these in-person events and retreats as a team, at least a couple times a year, because we need that stuff in order to default to trust and connection. So there's good and bad, but I think where we all have to just be mindful is, yes, it may be easier to say something digitally to someone that we'd struggle to say in person. But if we let that muscle of saying it in person or live on the phone completely atrophy, then there will be some conversations that require that. And you won't have the necessary strength to negotiate your raise, to have the tough conversation with the client or candidate, to have the difficult dialogue. You won't have the muscle. It's going to be weak. And so you have to create those micro moments outside of the virtual setting.
Oh, excellent point. I couldn't agree more. You had mentioned a little bit about, influence, people that have influenced you over the years. Who are some individuals or public figures that you admire for embracing their awkwardness? And maybe you have a favorite anecdote that you can share.
Oh, gosh, I have lots. In the business spheres, I think, again, Brene does a good job of, she uses self-deprecation appropriately, right? When she doesn't get something or know something, she's good at just like, I don't know what I'm talking about in this, but never on something skill related, right? So self-deprecating humor is a great diffusion tool for awkwardness. But the one key there is you don't want to be self-deprecating on something that you're supposed to know how to do, right? So I don't want to ever say, gosh, what a crappy speaker I was just then. Right? No, that's my job. I hope that I would never say something like that. But it is okay to say, gosh, I really am not very graceful when I'm trying to run this particular, stretch of the track, because I'm not graceful. I bump into stuff constantly, but it doesn't affect the perceptions of my professional aptitude. Right. So it's sort of, I think the business leaders, folks like Brene Brown, folks like Carolyn Childers is one of the co-founders of Chief. She's a C-suite executive who I think has done a beautiful job of embodying what I call awkward confidence. But I'll be honest, a lot of the women I admire most in this space, and there's a little bit of a double-edged sword here, are female comedians, because they do a good job of weaponizing their awkwardness, meaning using it very intentionally in a way that it actually makes them appear more powerful, more confident. Now, sadly, there's not enough examples in the business world. There's more on the sort of like TV circuit. But the thing that's the double-edged sword about it is these women, folks like Mindy Kaling and Tina Fey and Aubrey Plaza and Jennifer Lawrence, who really embody all of these little quirky bits about their full expressed selves and use it with confidence. The challenge is that they're extremely hardworking. They rehearse their butts off. They're all really smart. And so sometimes I think women, especially unfairly, don't get enough credit for all that goes into bringing a fully expressed, playful, embodied, misstep-filled self. And even while bringing that, as women, we still have to work doubly as hard to play in a world that was not designed originally for us, right? And systems that were created over decades that weren't for us. And women are still disproportionately scrutinized, especially women of color, and held to this standard of flawlessness. So the people I admire are the people that are willing to kind of be in the arena, in these spaces of admitting wrongdoing, of talking about how it completely went sideways. I remember there was an example that didn't make it in the book. The founder of Jenny's Ice Cream, she had some major, like, just flops on her way to success. But what I loved is that she talked about them openly and really just like shared them out loud. All of the female leaders that do that without doing it for performance, without doing it because they're supposed to, those are the people that I'm like, yes, this is the modern leader, male, female, or otherwise. This is the modern leader, people who can embody all of those bits and do it with confidence that this is the journey, to me, are the people we all need to look to as an example.
Oh, that's excellent, Henna. I hate to say this, but we're at the end here of our podcast. But let me ask, what about future projects? And if you could leave the audience with a power word, what would it be? So what do you have coming up on the horizon that we can see? Maybe a follow-up to Good Awkward.
Yeah, I mean, there will be another book in the future. I have some ideas that I'm seeding, but not quite there yet. My family is not ready for me to dive into another book project quite yet. But, increasingly, I would say the next turn of the wheel on this conversation is awkwardness is one specific emotion, but I'm really interested in studying what I've been more increasingly calling social fitness at work. We talk about physical fitness, we talk about mental fitness, but last year we learned that we are in a loneliness epidemic. We learned that it's very easy for people to put their heads down and avoid other humans. And what we're seeing at work is people not collaborating because they don't want to bother people staying in their silos, people not reaching out even when they really need the help. And so there's really significant workplace consequences that are starting to come out of this atrophy of our social fitness. And so sort of next wave is I'm really doubling down on learning about the impact of workplaces and sort of modern teamwork and how we solve for some of this through some strategies and ideas that are less talked about right now. So that's wave 2. And power word is I'm going to actually maybe leave with something a bit avant-garde. I was thinking about this. I think the power word I want to leave people with is firework. I think most people would pick spark or something that's like a little bit more at the beginning. But I'm increasingly of the belief that, yes, we need like the flame, we need the spark, but most people are bursting at the seams with something they want to say and something they need to say, and they keep looking for the spark. I just say, like, go full out and then own it if it doesn't go well. Go full out, go bright, go boisterous, go loud. And if it doesn't work, trust that people will applaud the effort. And as long as it's not completely career damaging, it will be an exercise worth doing. It's a social repetition, but let that firework out.
I love that. Firework. That's excellent. Thank you so much, Henna. It was great to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on the AI to Z podcast with Anna Frizzetto. If you found value in today's episode, consider following for more insightful STEM discussions. We'll be back with another deep dive. Until then.